You can repeat that question. I'm sorry, I meant to repeat the question, but I'm thinking more about the answer.
I work in healthcare. I'm a nurse. How do I speak to doctors to support healthcare reform? They are afraid Medicare will cap what they make, and it's already been cut. Doctors need to be paid as well.
So I think there's an issue that's very legitimate that some providers in the Medicare program are underpaid, and I also think it's a very legitimate issue that some Medicare providers are overpaid. And it distorts the way we deliver health care and whether you get the best possible care. I think it's important that we provide adequate reimbursement in the Medicare program so that we keep access to providers for people who rely on the program. I also think we have a huge issue with the reimbursement levels in the Medicaid program, which are much lower, in fact, than the Medicare program. One of the proposals on the table that came from President Obama and several leading Democrats is to give there's a group called MedPAC, and it looks without political influence at the payment levels that different kinds of providers receive in the Medicare program, and it tries to decide what is fair and what will ensure access for seniors and people with disabilities who rely on the program. But once they make recommendations, it becomes very political in Congress. And those providers with the greatest lobbying influence and the most ability to contribute to campaigns are coming out ahead, and others aren't. And so the proposal is to say that a group of outside experts without a political influence will look at what's best for seniors and people with disabilities in the Medicare program, make payment reform recommendations, which could mean some providers make more and some make less. And Congress has to vote it up or down, but they don't get to tamper with it too much. And we're hoping that that will help bring some good reason and rational judgment to Medicare reimbursement rates and actually increase access for seniors, people with disabilities, to providers. I think a big issue too is rural providers, and so I think MedPAC is looking at how can we ensure that rural providers are participating in the Medicare program, and they have some different kinds of reimbursement issues, different kinds of client-based costs.
Where will the cost, can you hear that? Can you hear that? Where will the cost of insuring everyone come from?
Well, that is the question. As you all know, over 10 years, healthcare reform would cost about $1 trillion. Now, that number gets tossed around by those who oppose healthcare reform. I think you just call them the right wing, what did you call them, extremists, or the radical fringe, less polite but more accurate perhaps. They will say it costs $1 trillion, and they don't bother to say the 10 years, and they don't bother to tell you that half of that is offset with savings that we support as consumer advocates, savings in the Medicare and Medicaid programs. Part of that is ending the overpayment of private insurers in the Medicare Advantage program. So there's half of those $1 trillion can come from savings within the system, and those are savings that are real because the Congressional Budget Office doesn't score prevention. There's a lot of things they won't score as a savings that we all know will save money in the system. These are real blatant problems in the system. There are other proposals on the table. All of them are controversial, but I think when we're done with it, we'll have a balanced budget approach, a paid-for approach to healthcare reform. Tough issue on the table right now is the employer exclusion. So if you work for someone who offers you health insurance, I work for Families USA, Ron Pollock, my ED, pays my health insurance, that's not taxable. I don't pay income taxes on the value of my health insurance benefit. And there's been some talk about changing that for some plans that are more than, say, valued at $25,000, or changing it only for people at very high income levels. This has been very controversial. Our friends at AFSCME have opposed it. We are being very cautious about looking at it because of the impact it could have on the employer-based system, and we don't want to unravel the good things we have now in our uniquely American system. But I'll say that is on the table, and AFSCME and many others are opposing that. There are other ideas like changing the way that rich folks get to deduct things from their income tax so that they get the same deduction they had under President Reagan rather than a much larger way of deducting that they have now. I mean, these are things that hit the very wealthiest people in the country and really just take them back to a place they were about 10 or 15 years ago before we really saw some tax reforms that were geared to the wealthy. And a lot of these things I'm not an expert on. I'm not a tax attorney, thank God. But we do have some more detail available if you're interested in it.
What is the future under the bills already out of committee for my HSA plan, health savings account plan?
Health savings account plans, do people know what those are? Those are plans that have a high deductible. And if you have a very high deductible, then you can put, it's a qualifying plan because the deductible is very high, then you can put some money into a tax-preferred savings account so that later you have the money to get through the high deductible to pay out of pocket for healthcare services. It's very popular with fairly wealthy people because they pay less in premiums and they have the ability to put money into a savings account, and the money is tax deferred going in and going out. It's one of the very, very few vehicles that have that kind of tax preference, which is a beautiful thing if you have the money to put it into the account. Mostly what we're seeing now is that there's going to be room to allow some high deductible plans to continue in the employer system, where we see a lot of them. Inside the exchange, it depends on which of those bills you look at, how high deductible plans will fare. There is a preference against them. And I think the reason is it is a lot of lost revenue to help the wealthy, and it is not providing a lot of help to low-income folks. So I can't say that you absolutely won't lose your high deductible plan with the health savings account attached, but if you have that through an employer, I think you're safe. If you are buying it in the private individual market and you go into the exchange, it probably won't be available to you. And here's where you get into some of the differences. In the health bill on the Senate side, there's an inside and the outside of the exchange marketplace. The House does not allow an unregulated outside market to continue, and we could get into why that's a big issue, but that gives you a sense of that. It's not a clean answer, but that one's in motion.
I have not been able to find out how the cost of premiums will be set for a public plan. Without this information, how can we be sure it truly will be affordable, especially for people who are not eligible for assistance in paying their premium?
Under all the proposals right now, first of all, there's a concept that the public plan option within the exchange will compete on a level playing field with private insurers. And what does that mean? It means the public plan will have to charge premiums that are high enough to ensure that the public plan stays solvent, that they can afford to pay the health care claims that come in without having extra federal money flow in to support them financially. So it's sort of, you have to charge enough in premiums so that you can stay afloat and pay claims. Then how are prices set? The real issue is what are the reimbursement levels of healthcare providers within the public plan. And one bill proposes that we tie that to Medicare, and as I've said, there's some problems with Medicare reimbursement. The Blue Dog House bill proposes that we allow the Secretary to negotiate prices across all healthcare services. And how those prices and how successful the federal government is at negotiating good prices without reducing access to